This week we're going to be using Photoshop for painting. So it's called House Painting and the folder is called Houses. There is an ASE file that stands for Adobe Swatch Exchange. So if you open up Photoshop, you can click directly on the little Photoshop button right there, and it's going to take you into the main Photoshop interface. Go to Window Swatches to make sure your swatches are open. Go to the hamburger menu at the top and say Import Swatches. Then we're going to go find that ASC file wherever you saved it. When you click on it, if you do not see it, it's simply because you have this change. So make sure to go down and you can either say All Files or literally go to ASE. And there it is. Click on it and say Load. If you pull this down, you will now see that we have home color. We have home color in our swatches. So these are the swatches that we would be using. And the Adobe Swatch Exchange is really good as far as if you were working with a specific client and you knew you always had to use the same colors, you could have swatches loaded for each client. The book does suggest that you have small list chosen. We now need to open up the TIFF file. So just say File Open and go find your files and open up houses.tiff. Now I'm going to switch my workspace to Window Workspace Painting and make sure you can still see the Layers menu. We are going to click on this background layer and you need to unlock it. If you just double click right here on the lock, it will unlock it. And sometimes that pops up. It's no big deal. Just hit OK. We need to rename that layer Sketch. Then create a new layer by clicking this little plus sign. And we're going to call that Walls. Now, to make sure that we are drawing on the right layer, I want you to relock the sketch layer. So click on Sketch and click the little lock icon. We're going to grab rectangular marquee tool and draw a box around the entire garage and make sure to put the pillars in it. Don't worry about that tree that's in the way. Go ahead and just draw around the entire garage. Remember, you can zoom in and out by clicking Alt and scrolling your mouse, and you can use the space bar to move around. So we have the marching ants. We now need to get the rest of the main walls of the building. So if you click Shift, you should see that a little plus sign has appeared. So that means we can add to the selection. So we're going to go around and choose all of the rest of the walls. Make sure that you're hitting Shift so that it gets all of them. You see that it's now now we have marching ants over this whole thing. And I need to add this little part of the wall back in. Shift. And then if we zoom in, we can see we've got this little tiny area. Now that we have the marching ants, we're going to fill that in with a color. So go up to your swatches, make sure you can see the new swatches that we have, and we want Stucco 2. So click on Stucco 2, and you'll see that Stucco 2 has gone into the main colors over here, the foreground color. We're now going to say Edit, Fill with the foreground color. And hit OK. So we need to be able to see through that a little bit. We're going to go to this actual layer and change the opacity down to 80%. Then we need to deselect, which is Control D, and we need to save this as House Working PSD. Now we're going to hide that layer by turning off the eyes and make a new layer. This one we're going to call Front Trim. So to fill in the trim, we're going to use a different tool. It's the Paint Bucket tool. It's right underneath the gradient. If you click and right-click, you should see there is the Paint Bucket tool. So grab the Paint Bucket tool, and we're going to choose Trim 1 under our swatches. Make sure you are on the front trim layer. Before we get started with this, we need to change our tolerance to 30. We need to make sure contiguous is on and all layers is on. If we did not have all layers on, then it would only fill in the entire layer because there's nothing on this layer. But because we have all layers turned on, it's going to look at the sketch layer that's underneath. Contiguous means do not get anything except for stuff that is continuously touching. So now we're going to click right here, and it should fill that in. If this does not work for you, make sure you have all of these checked like I do. Now we're going to go through and finish up all the trim. Now this part here may be hard to get. The book suggests that you grab the rectangular marquee tool, select it, and then just say Edit Fill with foreground color. So if you're not able to get those parts because they have all this shading in them, just draw a box around it and say Edit Fill. Now, if we turn off the sketch at this point, you can kind of see it's not looking perfect. There's little holes and things, but don't worry about it because we're going to be putting stuff back on top of that with textures and that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off that front trim. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call that Fascia. And that's for these little pieces that are on top. They're going to be a little bit darker, so we're going to use Trim 2 for them. So click Trim 2 and use the same tool to fill in all of those. Now, if you ever see that you're having a problem nothing's happening, it's probably because you have a selection. So say Control D to make sure you don't have any selections. That may be why it's not working for you. All right, we're going to make another layer and call that Garage Door. And we're going to fill that in with Doors Swatch 3. And I would use the Paint Bucket tool again for this one. And don't worry too much about that right now. We can fix that later. All right, now we need to make a new layer, and we're going to call that Pavement. So that is for this down here. But if we were to just click on the tool, if we were just click on Fill, it's going to fill everything because there isn't a bottom part of this. So we could use the rectangular marquee tool to draw a box around it, but it's not a true box. So I would grab the Polygon Lasso tool to draw a basic shape around where this is. You just click, click, click until you see the marching ants. Now that it's all filled in, you can use the paint dropper tool, and we need to fill it with Pavement 1 swatch. All right, make sure you don't have any marching ants, so that'd be Control D, and we need to fill in the rest of the pavement. Now, you don't have to worry about having a selection because these are actual boxes. So once again, make sure you don't have a selection, Control D. Go ahead and save your work. Okay, we're going to make 2 new layers in the Layers panel. The bottom one we're going to call Front Door. The one above it, we're going to call it FD Panels for Front Door Panels. And we're going to start on the Front Door layer. Zoom in so you can see the front door. And we're going to grab the rectangular marquee tool and select the door. Make sure to not select this little edge part. So just select the door. We're going to get the swatch called Doors 3 and grab the Paint Bucket tool. You can turn off all layers at this point and just fill it in. Once you've filled it in, go change the opacity down to 50%. And you can save your work. then click on FD panels. We're going to fill in these little panels. So at this point, we're going to be using the brush tool. So you need to go into your preferences. For Macintosh, you need to click on the little Photoshop icon. For PC, click on Edit Preferences and go to your cursors. And make sure full-size brush tip is turned on and show crosshairs in brush tip. And then hit OK. Now, so when you're in the brush tool, you should be able to see this little round thing that shows you the size of your brush with a little plus sign. If you do not see that, more than likely your caps lock is turned on. When you have caps lock turned on, you will not be able to see your cursor. So make sure that's turned off. So that's how big the brush is going to be. If I were to start drawing, that's how big it would be right now. Now, the reason it only drew inside there is because I have a rectangular marquee. So the size of our brush, you can change it either up here, and here are all our brushes. You can load more brushes right here from Adobe, or you can grab some off of the internet. But this is the basic brush area, the size, and how hard. Is it really soft or is it a hard brush? You can also see it over here in the brushes panel. I like to mess with it over here, so you're going to see me going to right over here. So the brush wants us to, the book wants us to start with a 10 pixel brush and 100% hardness. We're now going to choose Doors 4 as our swatches. And I'm going to place this cursor over the top of where we're going to be drawing. And you can see that it's too big. See, if I were to start drawing, that is too big for what we need. So the easiest way to fix this is to use your bracket tools. Your bracket tools are on the keyboard right next to the P. So if you click on the bracket, you can see that that brush tip is getting bigger or smaller. And if you look over here, you can see it is also getting bigger or smaller. So we started with 10. The book wants us to click the bracket key 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're now down at 6, which better fits what we're drawing. So you're going to click once at the top, shift, and then click down here, and it's going to draw a straight line for you. So that is one of the tricks in Photoshop is click once, shift, click again, and it draws a straight line. You can also start drawing, then hit shift, and it will draw a straight line. It doesn't matter where you move your mouse, it's going to draw a straight line. Now that's just me showing you. You don't need to do that, so undo. We now need to click once, shift, and draw that one. And we go down to the bottom and do the same thing. Now for this outer part, we want it to be hard on the outside, but we want it to be soft on the inside. So we're going to change the brush softness to 0%. The book wants you to bring this up to 15 pixels. I actually think that's way too much, and it's kind of hard to do it like that. But you can try it with 15. I'm going to back it down to 10. So try it either way if you want to come back and change it to 10 in a second. I just think 15 is a little too much. So we're still using Doors 4 as our swatch. We're going to go get the rectangular marquee tool and draw a marquee around the outside. Try to get the outside of this so this will work better. Now, when we get our soft brush, which is a 0 hardness, which means it's completely soft, and we click right on the top of that, shift, click to the bottom, it's going to be hard on one side and soft on the other. This is why I said to make it 10 instead of 15. If you make it 15, it's going to go over into the one you've already drawn. We're going to do that on the top and on the right side. We now need to get rid of those marching ants, and you can see where it's harder and softer. Now we need to do the top. Draw the rectangular marquee. Now, while that marquee is still there, let's do this other side. So we need to shift it to Doors 2. On this one, we do need to be on 10 points. So if you were on 15 points, go change it to 10 points. And now we're going to draw this other side. Same thing on the bottom. Redraw this marquee. It doesn't have to be exact, but get it pretty close. and Control D to get rid of the marching ants. You can see that it's really hard on the outside and soft on the inside. Now we could do this for the other side of the door, but an easier way is to grab your Move tool, Alt, drag to the right, and it's going to make a copy. So just make a copy for the second side. We're about done with the door. Now for the handle, it's just going to let you draw it yourself. So go get a hard brush and choose a darker color and just kind of draw a basic shape here. I think my brush is a little too big. There we go. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but draw a little handle. Once you've got the handle the way you want, you can go down to the front door original that we made and bring that opacity back up to 100%. That doesn't look too bad for our door. We're now going to group all of these together. So click on your front door, Shift, and then click on the top one so you have all three of these selected. And we're going to click this button right here to make a group. And we're going to call that group, you guessed it, front door. Save your work. Within that layer group, you're going to open it up by clicking this little thing. And we want to go to the actual front door layer. A way to select something that is over transparency like this is to click Control or Command for Mac and click on the actual thumbnail, not the name, but the thumbnail. Do you see that it has put a rectangular marquee exactly around the outside of the front door? So now that we have that selected, we're going to go up to Edit, Stroke, choose a 3-point stroke, and you need to tell it to go to the center, and now hit OK. And if we get rid of the marching ants, you will see that it has made a pretty little stroke around the outside of that. Now we need to get a rectangular marquee. Get a rectangular marquee and draw it around the outside big part here. And let's add a same stroke that we did a second ago. This time it's going to be 5 points. So Edit Stroke and make it 5 points to the center. All right, get rid of your marching ants. Now we need to fix this down here. So we're going to hand draw that in. Go get your brush tool. Make it a 5-pixel brush at 100% hardness. So if you click right here and make sure it's kind of lined up, then you can click Shift and it's going to draw it straight across. Let's go back over here. Click once, Shift, draw straight across. All right, save your work. Okay, move over to the window, and we need to make a new layer. So just click off of the front door and then click the new layer button. We're going to call this window. For this, we're going to be using the pen tool, which is right here. So just draw around this upper arch with the pen tool. And remember, if you can't get it perfect, you can always go back and fix it later. Alt, pull that to the direction you want to go. Once we have this, that is a blue, what they call a work path. You can see your work path by going to Paths, which should be behind your Layers menu. There is our work path, so make sure it is selected and then choose this button right here. We're just going to create a selection from our work path. Now that we have that selection, make sure that you are in the Windows layer, and we're going to go up and add a stroke. So Edit Stroke. We're going to do a 6-point stroke. Make sure it's black, so just choose black. You can just click on that color right there. And we do need to say centered and hit OK. So while you still have the selection, we need to make another stroke. So say Edit, Stroke. This time we want to do a pure white stroke. And we're going to make it 3 points and centered. Ah, kind of pretty. Get rid of your marching ants with Control D, and you're going to do the same thing down here on the bottom part of the window. This time we're going to use the rectangular marquee tool and just do the same exact thing. When you're done with that, get rid of your marching ants, Control D, and save your work. Now we need to draw the panes on the window. We're going to make a new layer right above the window layer, and you can just leave it layer 1. We're going to go to paths, and we're going to be using work paths again. Grab your pen tool and draw a straight line across. Now, if it isn't straight, you're not going to be happy. I would zoom in and see if it looks like it's straight. If it's not, you kind of need to fix it before you move on. I'm going to move mine just a little bit. Once you think you have it straight, make sure that you are on the default colors. So that'd be black on top and white on bottom. It's this little button right here. We're going to go to the pencil tool, which should be right under or right behind the brush tool. And we're going to have a 5-pixel pencil. 5 pixels and on black. In the work path, we're going to go over and tell it, I want you to make a stroke on our path. And I want you to use pencil. So say OK. While it's still selected, we're going to go change this to 3 points. Flip it so that white is on top, and now do it again. So we have black and white. If I go back over to layers and turn off sketch, you can see what it's looking like. Don't worry about it's over that a little bit because we're going to put it behind in just a minute. Now that you're back on the layers panel, grab that one layer with your move tool, Alt and drag down to make a copy. Alt, drag down to make another copy. So now the book says to use any method that you feel like to do the rest of this window. So this is how I would do it. I would grab this layer right here and make a copy of it. Grab the move tool, this top layer, I'm going to click it. I'm going to click and drag it down into the Make New Layer button. So I now have 2 versions of that. If I move it a little bit, you can see I now have 2 of them. I need to now flip that so it's going the other direction. At this point, we need to make sure we're not on the work path anymore. So go click off of the work path in Paths. Go back to Layers. Now we're actually just on the layer. Take that layer, Edit, Transform, Rotate. And up here, you can just tell it 90%. So now we have that one going up and down. This is a little too long, so while you're still in free transform, go turn off this button right here and just change the height to 77%, and it should fit correctly. Now that you've got that, you can Alt drag to make copies of these. For this one up here, let's do the path thing again. We're going to go to make sure that we're on the work path and use your tool. Make sure the pencil is on 5, and we need to be on black first. Stroke subpath. Yes. Go change it to 3. And white. Make sure to select off the work path. Go back into layers. Let's turn off the sketch layer so we can see. That is looking pretty good. We need to grab all of these top layers. So click the top one, Shift, and then click all the way down to the layer above the window layer. Go to the hamburger menu and say Merge Layers. So it's going to merge the ones that we've selected. Now pick up the window and put it above that so it's going to hide any of our little edges. That looks pretty good. We can now save our work and move on to the next part. We're now going to work on the garage door. Turn off every layer except for sketch and garage door. Make sure you are on the garage door layer and choose Doors 4 as your swatch. We're going to get the brush tool. And we need to have a 25-point brush. Hardness 100%. But right here in mode, we're going to choose behind. Let me show you. If I were to start drawing on this, it would just draw over what we're doing. We want to draw those little lines in there. So instead of normal, we're going to choose behind. I can just draw these behind, and it's only going to put it behind what we've already drawn. So go ahead and fill in all of these and all of these. Now we need to do this layer around the outside, but don't worry if you can't get it perfect. We're going to cover it up. So just kind of get that little black stuff. And go ahead and fix any of this weird little dots you've got. That's okay, it just looks like texture. Turn on the one called Front Trim, pick it up and drag it above the garage door. And it should cover up any of the weirdness that you have. Now I've got an issue right here with my tree, but that's going to be covered up when we get to the tree area. So once you're done with that, hit save and move on. Now we're going to work on this front trim to fill in all these little holes and things. We need to select front trim. So make sure you're on that layer, Control, and then click on the actual thumbnail, and you'll see we have a selection. So we need to modify this selection. Go up to Select, Modify, Expand. And we're going to expand the selection by 4 pixels and hit OK. Now we need to modify it one more time. Go to Select, Modify, and Feather. We're going to feather it by 3 pixels and say OK. Now we need to make sure we're still on Doors 4, and we're going to go to Edit, Fill. Now if we were to just hit Fill like we have in the past, it would fill in everything we've already done. That is not what we want. So when we say Edit Fill this time, we're going to click Behind, and it's going to do the same thing we just did, but it's going to put it all behind it. Hit OK. And now it has filled in all of these little holes, and it's made it look like we have a cool texture. Now we're going to turn on the pavement layer. Select that one, Control, click on the thumbnail. And we need to do the same thing except for no feathering. So Select, Modify, Expand by 4 pixels. We're going to choose Pavement 2. Edit, Fill, make sure it's on behind, and hit OK. So now Control D to get rid of your marching ants. And any little issues that you have right here, we're going to fix manually. So just go get your brush tool, make sure you're in behind and that you're on Pavement 2. And we're going to fix any little areas that we messed up. Once you have that good, save your work. Now turn off everything except for the walls layer, and we need to go ahead and make the walls layer 100%. Go back into your brushes. And we need to open up some of the old brushes. So go right here and say Legacy Brushes. And say OK. When you go up to it again, you should see Legacy Brushes. We want to look for one that is called Faux Finish Brushes. Stencil Sponge Wet. And if you put it at about 700, Control, click on the thumbnail, choose Stucco 3 as your color, and just draw some pretty texture on there. Control D to get rid of your marching ants and save your work. We now need to turn everything back on and turn your walls layer down to 50% so that you can see the sketch through it. We'll turn that back up later. We now need to make a new layer, and we're going to call that House Shadows. Move that layer to be under the one called Front Trim. Now we need to grab our brush and change it from that crazy brush back to just a normal brush, general, soft brushes. and make the size 100. And we need to change this right here to be multiply. If we tried to start drawing shadows right now with normal, this would not be a very pretty shadow. So we're going to change it to say multiply, and we're going to have the opacity to 25%. We're going to choose the color Doors 3. So make sure this button right here is clicked to turn on airbrushing. What airbrush is going to do is it's going to let us slowly build up the color. Now we can just try to match what they already have here as the shadows. And you won't see it at first, but just keep building. Make sure that you are on the house shadows layer. And make sure to let go of your mouse. Sometimes it's not going to build up until you let go of the mouse. So just kind of draw that shadow. I'm going to make my mouse a little bit smaller, and then let's draw this shadow. Don't worry about if you go out of it a little bit. We're going to create 2 layers called one window inside and one windows shadows. And make sure window inside is below window shadows. When you're on the windows inside, grab your rectangular marquee tool and draw a box that's inside the window. We're going to say Edit Fill. We're going to fill it with black. Make sure it's normal. And we're going to make it 35% and hit OK. Now on this window shadows area, go back and get the same brush that you were using before, but this time we're just going to choose black, and we're going to give a few little shadows to inside that window. Because those are shadows that were actually inside the house. When you're done with that, save your work. Now we're going to go back to our original files and open up the file called Tiles. Open up Window, Patterns. In the Patterns menu, just click on the little plus sign, and it's going to bring up pattern name. We're going to call this Shingles, and hit OK. And you can see it's added a new pattern. We can go back to our original house working. We now need to go above all the layers and create a new layer, call it Roof 1. With your Polygon Lasso tool, draw around where the roof would be. Once you connect back at the beginning, you should have the marching ants, and we can go up to we can go up to Edit, Fill. This time choose Pattern, and go find the pattern we just made, which is the shingles. Click OK. Make sure the mode is normal and opacity is 100%. And hit OK. Now you can hide this layer, and we're going to do the same thing again twice to make this part of the roof and this part of the roof. Make sure to get rid of the marching ants that we had at first, Control D. So now we're going to make 2 new layers. One is called Roof 2, Roof 3, and do the same exact thing we just did. Control D to get rid of the marching ants. So when you turn them all on, we have a problem because they were all created with the same thing. So let's kind of deal with that. Turn off Roof 2 and 3, and let's just deal with Roof 1. If you bring the opacity down to 50%, you can see that it actually obscured this area that we don't want it to obscure. So I'm going to go and select that using the Polygon tool. And then I'm just going to click the Delete key. So it deleted that away. Now we can hit Control D to get rid of the marching ants. we can put this roof back up to 100%. So now the book says that we should use any of the ways we've learned to make this kind of stick out from the other part of the roof. So I think what I would use is the draw behind that we've been using. So I'm going to go to roof 2, which is the little part over there. I'm going to go get my brush, and I don't know, about 36 is what I've got. I'm going to sample this red, and then I'm going to darken it. So just double click, and let's darken that some. And then I'm just going to draw behind to kind of make like a little shadow of what would be there, to make it stick out a little bit. So the next part of the book is about saving a custom pattern. You can do that if you want on page 546, but I'm not going to make you turn it in. So you would just be saving it. So let's move on to painting by nature. So in stage 4, we're going to create a new layer on top of everything called Tree 1. Now I want you to turn off everything except for the sketch layer and get a rectangular marquee around this general area of where this tree is. We're now going to go up into Filter, Render, Tree. And this may take a minute to load on your computer. So there are a bunch of different trees, and you can sit there and look at them. It wants you to choose this number 10 tree, just kind of a thin, tall tree. You can experiment the different ways that the light would be falling and that kind of thing. When you get the way you want, just hit OK. And you have rendered your own tree. If you turn off the sketch layer, you can say there is your tree. We're going to do the same thing with the second tree. Now you can actually change this after you've drawn it. So we can go into Free Transform, Control T, and just kind of stretch this out a little bit and make it fit that area a little bit better. When you've got it the way you want, just say OK and Control D to get rid of your marching ants. So I'm going to make my second tree the same way. But this one, I want the branches height to be higher, kind of like it is in the drawing. I think that'll be better. And now we have 2 trees. Okay, we're almost done. We have to make the shrubs. So let's make a new layer and call it Shrubs. And we're going to make a customized brush to make this with. All right, now we need to go to Brush Settings. So if you can't find it, it's in Windows Brush Settings, or it'll be right here within your brush settings. We're going to have a size of 40. Angle of 30. Roundness to 70%. Now you need to go over to the left and click on Shape Dynamics and have the jitter at 50%. Scattering needs to go to 150. And you can see how it's changing it down here. And we need to have a count of 2. Go to Color Dynamics, and we want it to flip back and forth between 2 different colors. So we need to say 100%, I want you to flip back and forth between our foreground and our background color. In transfer, we need to have an opacity jitter of 15%. So that means it's going to flip back and forth between how opaque it is. So it's going to make a really varied looking brush. We need to go on the foreground color and make it foliage 2. Click on the background color and make it foliage 1. Now when you start drawing these, make sure that you're on the shrubs layer. When you do start drawing these, if you don't see that it's moving around if you don't see that it's changing enough, I would go back to scattering and choose both axes, because then it's going to flip around more. So just draw your scrubs. We need to pick up shrubs and move it behind the trees. The book does tell you how to define a brush preset, how you can save that. I am not going to ask you to turn that in, so if you'd like to go ahead and do that, you can, but we're not going to be turning it in. The last thing that it tells you to do is to finish the grass however you feel like doing it. Well, that's not very helpful. I'll show you how I'm going to do it. First off, I moved my shrubs layer behind the trees. I'm going to make a new layer and call that grass. Now, if you go back into your brushes tool, there is a brush for grass in the legacy brushes. I kind of forget where it is, so let's search for it. There should be a search bar up here. Grass. So there's taller grass and then shorter grass. So we can use the tall grass to make these little things, and then the bottom grass. So let's try this grass. Let me see how big it is. Okay, that's actually about the right size. So I'm going to leave it on the same colors that we had before. And of course, we can make this bigger and smaller with our bracket keys, right, to make small grass or big grass. And I'm just going to draw some grass in. And actually, I think it might help to turn off the sketch layer so I can see better what I'm doing. Make sure you're on that grass layer. All right, I'm now going to put the grass needs to go behind the shrubs. So now we have to determine where these things should be. For instance, I move this over here. I want my grass to be behind the pavement. That definitely looks better there. But maybe on top, let me put just a little bit on top of the trees. So I'm going to make a new layer and just put a little bit on top of the trees. There we go. And then let's try that other kind of grass to see if we can make some bigger pieces and maybe darken this a little bit. At this point, you should add another layer underneath all the other layers. Edit, fill with white. Okay, when you're finished, we're going to save it as a PDF for print. File, save as. Choose Photoshop PDF. Say OK. High quality print. And uncheck everything except for this optimize for fast web preview. Last name, house painting PDF. And we're done.